So what we're going to do now, keeping with our open house theme, is we'll turn off those cameras and we're going to hand the mic over to Dr. Joel Dvoskin. Joel, as I'm sure he'll tell you, at least I hope he'll tell you, was one of the very first people to be focusing on how we use active bystandership skills in the police context. So Kyle, can you put on Joel's camera and microphone?
Yep, I just asked him to do so.
Okay. Everyone bear with us for 1 second. I see the mic coming on, and I think the camera will be coming on in 1 moment. There we go. Joel, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, we can. Joel, I pass you the mic, my friend.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Joel Dvoskin. I'm a psychologist in Tucson, Arizona. I'm going to talk about the effects of able and active bystandership on officer wellness. So what you've heard already said, there's 3 legs to this. We want to prevent mistakes and misconduct, but we also want to improve the lives of our officers. If I want you to change your behavior, the first question I need to think about is, what's in it for you? Why would officers want to do this? And what we found in New Orleans is that selling officers on the quality of their own professional life, their own personal life, matters to them a great deal. So historically, when officers became aware of a serious mistake or misconduct by a colleague, they were faced with 2 horrible choices. One, they could tell somebody and be risk being labeled a snitch, which in some departments, many departments, will get you ostracized by fellow officers. And in the worst case scenario, could endanger your life. If you call for backup and people don't show up, your life's in danger. So officers were between a rock and a hard place. If they didn't snitch or rat or tell somebody or report it, then they were in a position where they would have to lie about it, either to say I didn't see anything when they did, or to write a report that says I didn't see anything, or even to write down something that never actually happened, which in many places is actually a crime. When we're faced with these choices between a rock and a hard place, what does it do to somebody psychologically? It makes me doubt myself. It makes me wonder about why I got into this business in the first place. It makes me doubt my colleague and maybe a lot of my colleagues. But either choice causes me fear, and fear causes anxiety, and anxiety is not healthy. So ABLE and EPIC have a potential to improve morale by reducing officer anxiety and fear. But it's also a way of redefining what it means to have each other's back. One of the great things about law enforcement is the camaraderie that comes from believing that there's other members of this team who, quote unquote, have my back. So what does it mean to have my back? Well, historically, it meant supporting you no matter what you did, even if what you did is going to ruin your career. It also meant that I have to jeopardize my own career by lying about what you did, which in turn jeopardizes my family, especially if I'm the sole breadwinner of the family. If I go to prison or if I lose my job, my family suffers. So why in the world would I want to be forced to choose between loyalty to my family and loyalty to my fellow officers? Well, in my opinion, for the first time in New Orleans, the development of EPIC gave officers a third and much better choice. And that is to prevent the bad thing from happening in the first place, so I don't have a choice to make. There's nothing to report because I prevented it from happening. And in the meantime, I prevented my fellow officer from jeopardizing their own career So not only did I serve my family's interests, but I served your family's interests. I just want to say a quick word about officer safety. So the two most important ways that I can help an officer's wellness is to keep them alive and to keep them in their career. Well, as far as keeping officers alive, one of the things we know from research is that when we lay hands on somebody, the likelihood of our injury goes up. So one of the ways to stay safe is to reduce the number of times that you lay hands on somebody. And now, when you have to do it, you have to do it. But if it's unnecessary, a lot of bad things happen. And one of them is increased officer injuries. So let's talk about the stress of policing. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know, but policing is extremely stressful, and it's never been more stressful than it is right now in America. I'm going to talk about some of the predictable results of high rates of chronic stress, and that includes divorce, alcoholism, family violence, and suicide. Now, these are not fun things to talk about, and I apologize, but they're important. Officers face challenges that very few other professions face. Officers are routinely exposed to violence that they either witness or exposed to the aftermath of it. They're also exposed to lots of human suffering. People call the police for all kinds of reasons that seldom mean I want to report something good that just happened in my life. Officer surveys identify violence exposure as the most significant work-related stressor for police. It wears on people. And we know from research that these stresses add up. They're cumulative over time. Studies also describe the links between police stress and poor family functioning. To take one example, in many departments, officers still have to work erratic or unpredictable schedules that prevent them from spending predictable time with their family. When an officer has to miss their daughter's dance recital or their daughter's soccer game, it's stressful for people. Also, a lot of officers that I know say, I don't want to bring work home with me. I don't want to dump that on my wife or my husband when I get home. So what do? They come home and they're silent, but they're in a bad mood. And the partner or the spouse thinks, well, what did I do? Why are they mad at me? And because the officer won't talk about what happened, for good reasons. It's not that they're trying to be mean. It's that they don't want to bring this home. But unfortunately, many spouses report that this causes friction in the relationship. Another problem, according to one report, 40% of police officers suffer from a sleep disorder, which is double the rate, the estimated rate of the general population. Again, this is a combination of cumulative stress, anxiety, and also the changes in personal schedules that policing often requires. Alcohol. Estimates show that between 20 and 25% of police officers are problem drinkers. This is by surveys of police officers. And we know that in many departments, alcohol consumption is an important part of police culture. And police scholars identify the problem of off-duty alcohol abuse as early as the 70s. It's always been an issue. So what are the consequences of extreme stress? Well, some of them are intrapersonal, which is my own mood and emotions and thinking. So that can be depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, secondary post-traumatic stress disorder from observing traumatic events, substance abuse, whether that's food, alcohol, painkillers, drugs, sleep disturbances, familial stresses, divorce, intimate partner violence, child abuse. These are all things that are reportedly more common among police officers than the general population, and all of them are attributable to chronic stress. Occupational consequences, time and attendance, forced overtime, organizational consequences, bad morale in the department that one works in, and of course health consequences such as blood pressure, high hormonal stress levels, all of which can increase the likelihood of heart problems, coronary problems, heart attacks, etc. Depression, anxiety, and PTSD are especially common among police officers, but the police culture tells people not to acknowledge them. The stigma of mental problems or emotional problems is alive and well in America, but it's also alive and well within the police culture. In addition to stigma, there's the machismo of, and I don't mean men, I mean men and women alike, that police officers aren't supposed to show weakness. So all of these things lead to the most serious consequence of chronic stress, and that's suicide by police officers. The Police Executive Research Forum has issued studies and publications about officer suicide. Numerous studies show that law enforcement officers are at a higher risk of suicide than almost any other profession. And the numbers are underreported. I know of cases where medical examiners have been urged to report an officer suicide as an accidental death to protect the family from embarrassment or shame. The risk of suicide among police officers is 54% higher than among American workers in general. And check this out. The risk of suicide among police officers is higher than the risk of suicide among prison inmates. As Jonathan said earlier, police officers are much more likely to die by suicide than to die on the line of duty. Over a 4-year period, at least, and again, it's underreported, 648 police officers committed suicide compared to 442 officers who were killed in the line of duty during the same 4-year period. And the number of officer suicides, while it varies from year to year, appears to be steadily increasing. And interviews with survivors, in other words, fellow officers, friends of the officer who died, suggest that other officers frequently saw them going down the tubes, saw the officer exhibiting signs of depression, extreme anxiety, despair before the suicide. What a wonderful opportunity for active bystandership, to speak up and say something that might encourage the person to ask for and get the help that they need so that they can continue their career and continue their life. Okay, now I'm going to talk about another uncomfortable topic, which is domestic and intimate partner violence. We know that officer-involved domestic violence is underreported. We know it's a serious problem within officer families, but it's very hard to collect accurate prevalence statistics. But some studies show that at least 30 to 40% of police officer families have experienced domestic violence, which is considerably greater than the general population. Here's an excerpt. The causes of the high rate of domestic violence in police officer families can be attributed to the unique job-related problems that police officers face, which we've talked about. Congress passed the Crystal Judson Domestic Violence Protocol Program, which provides funding to law enforcement agencies to counter officer-involved domestic violence. I just want to finish with how can active bystanders can help. If you see something, say something, applies to us with our friends. If you see a friend that's exhibiting despair, it's okay, it's necessary to ask them if they're thinking about hurting themselves. You're not going to give them an idea that they wouldn't have otherwise had. We know that peer-to-peer approach is one of the most effective ways of helping people with emotional problems like despair. We want to ABLE teaches people not only how to provide an intervention, but how to receive one. If you want an example of a case, I don't have time to go into the details of it, but the David Brame case, David Brame shot and killed his wife after she made allegations of domestic violence. And Brame's friend and assistant chief knew about this and didn't intervene with him. Had she intervened, we don't know what would have happened, but if he had gotten help instead of pulling the trigger on that gun, and David will never be able to ask him, because after he shot his estranged wife, David Brame shot and killed himself. The best benefits are ABLE, in my opinion, are to save lives and to save careers of police officers. Thank you all for your attention. I appreciate it.
Joel, thank you so much. You have taught me so much over these years since I've known you. You've done so much for New Orleans, and now thank you for doing so much for the country. Really appreciate it.